Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome to First Parish, Unitarian Universalist of Arlington.
We choose
to be
a liberal religious community,
welcoming
to all.
We encourage each other
on our spiritual journeys,
support one another
through the changes in our lives,
and challenge the excesses
and injustices of our time.
Called to love,
and upheld by joy.
We live our faith.
It is good to be back. I have missed you. As Unitarian Universalists, we have no one way to understand God. In fact, many of us don't even like using the word. But some of us do, and all of us have different ways of understanding what is sacred or divine or significant in our lives. This week, God came to me as peace, a sense of serenity while lying on the grass at Mount Auburn Cemetery at sunset. As I listened to the cacophony of birds competing for airtime, my eyes wandered up to branches overhead. There was a break in the leaves, a patch of blue sky. Oh, I thought, hi, God. I am glad for your company. This prayer is written in response to that moment. I invite each of us to take a breath, to settle our thoughts, maybe settle our bodies, and join me for a time of prayer and special attention. Spirit of life and love, we ask for companionship, a sacred and steady presence that moves with us. Great mystery, we ask for your accompaniment, knowing that we need many things, knowing that we don't always know what that looks like. Some of us are traversing the rough roads of grief, mourning the death of a loved one, reeling from the loss of a relationship. Spirit of life, may we find you as support, a hug from a friend, a wordless tissue passed at just the right moment. Some of us are feeling sinister, walls of despair closing in, constant headlines flashing across our phones of yet another person taken, of yet another act of violence. Holy One, may you come to us as hope. May we feel your presence in the tight arms of a stranger, not letting go on the picket line. May we know you as fierceness, as we watch one mother protect another from ICE agents. Some of us are feeling uncertainty, wary of change, tired of facing unknowns. Spirit of life, may you come to us as trust, the consistency of spring blossoms, the certainty of traditions passed down through community, through generations. God of many names and no name at all, you sometimes delight us in the wide eyes of a child bouncing into a new day. You might appear in a cherry blossom or a fragrant lilac, in that perfect patch of blue sky. For those moments, may we know you with gratitude and thanksgiving. However we know the sacred, however trust, reassurance, gratitude, comfort comes to us, may we find connection and reassurance in our breath. Join me for 2 minutes of silence.
Many of you have met with me in my office over the years. You have come as you awaited a diagnosis. You have come in the middle of a medical treatment. You have come struggling with betrayal, forgiveness of another, of yourself. You've come carrying the burden of a family member with mental illness. You have come feeling it was time to make a change with your job, your relationship. You have come when you didn't know how to make ends meet. You have come when grief or confusion seemed like they would never let up. You have come when you didn't know what to do or how to be. Always, I listened, asked questions. Occasionally, I prayed with you. Occasionally, I pulled a book from my shelf and read a snippet to you. Over the years, I found myself pulling out one particular poem again and again. So many times, in fact, that I tacked several copies to my bulletin board for whenever it might be needed. That poem is our reading this morning. Mrs. George Reece by Edgar Lee Masters from the Spoon River Anthology. To this generation, I would say, memorize some bit of verse of truth or beauty. It may serve a turn in your life. My husband had nothing to do with the fall of the bank. He was only cashier. The wreck was due to the president, Thomas Rhodes, and his vain, unscrupulous son. Yet my husband was sent to prison, and I was left with the children to feed and clothe and school them. And I did it, and sent them forth into the world, all clean and strong, and all through the wisdom of Pope the poet. Act well your part, there all the honor lies. Act well your part. Here is what I have tried to say to you and to myself over the years. So often our lot is not chosen. We may grieve, we may rail at the unexpected turn, the loss, the heavy cost, but we are also given a choice to choose how we will respond to the circumstances of our lives and the circumstances of our times. Act well your part. There all the honor lies. What is happening in our nation is often compared to Germany in the 1930s. Germany, like the United States, was an advanced nation experiencing economic challenges. A leader fed the resentment of the people, blamed a minority population for its troubles, sent people from their homes, arranged large military parades, and catered to nationalist sentiments. We know how dangerous that can be. But this week, I turn to another disturbing historic episode, another comparison. Following the Russian Revolution in 1917, the creation of the Soviet Republic, and then Stalin's rise to power, communism was seen as a threat on the global stage. The Berlin Wall divided East and West. Some interpreted communism as only a threat on an international level, and others said it was also a domestic issue in which the United States was threatened from within. Joseph McCarthy was a senator from Wisconsin, and in 1950, Joseph McCarthy fueled a wave of communist fear. He fed the idea that people who joined the Communist Party in this country were not people exercising their political freedoms, but were the equivalent of terrorists. But McCarthy's persecution was not limited to official members of the Communist Party. He made suspect people who had attended a meeting, a lecture, read communist literature from the public library. All became suspect. And through hearings of the House Un-American Activities Committee, people were fired from their jobs, blacklisted, and unable to secure new jobs. The blacklisted included Aaron Copland, Charlie Chaplin, Leonard Bernstein, Paul Robeson, and Lucille Ball. Dissent was mostly under the radar of public opinion polls. Still, there were a handful of liberal preachers who spoke out, and journalists like Fred Moreau kept informing the public. It may have seemed insurmountable, but conversations around the kitchen table, at dinner parties, at clubs and bars grew in number. People who never watched television during the day began watching the hearings of the House Un-American Activities Committee. Slowly, the stage was being set. Sometimes it takes many years for people to rise up and reach critical mass. Three weeks from today will be my last Sunday with you. We will engage in a ceremony releasing me from my vows to serve as your minister. I am retiring from full-time parish ministry. Bittersweet is the word I say over and over. This is a bittersweet parting. I am excited about leading a simpler life in Vermont, and I am so very sad to be leaving you. Ministry and religious community has shaped my entire adult life. This is my story, or a version of my story. My story, like each of your stories, gets a chance to be reshaped every time we tell it, every time someone listens deeply to it. So here is today's version of my story. I heard a call and became a minister. It wasn't a call in the conventional sense. There was no voice, no words from outside myself. A God in the sky did not speak to me. Indeed, in those days, I had no sense of some holy presence. I was all skeptic, scrappy fighter for the good. I had been raised in a Unitarian Universalist congregation by hard-edged rationalist parents who had little truck with the notion of God. No, this call rose up from within me, a still, small voice, a powerful whisper. I was then at a stage of life when the future seemed so very unknown. I was in school. I had been pre-med with aspirations to being an ER doc, but I fell off that clear path. I loved history and majored in it. I sat at the black table in the dining room, that's what we called it, finding the conversation with African American students more topical and more compelling. I immersed myself in feminist theory. I interned in Washington. I wrote news for radio broadcasts. I preached a lay summer sermon. I did know I wanted to contribute to making the world better in some way, but exactly how was not clear. And so when people asked me what I was going to do after graduation, I would offer irreverent answers to throw them off. I am going to be a highway judge, driving around the country, deciding which roads should be designated as scenic. Or, I am going to be a supermarket counter. I will stand at the checkout and count people's groceries to see if they qualify for the express lane. In my uncertainty, I was snarky. That was more than 40 years ago. Most people then did not consider or even imagine a woman in the pulpit. It was as peculiar then as seeing a female gas attendant today. Has anyone seen one? Oh, thank you, Mary. It was as peculiar then, and still is, in some places. Now, no one in the Unitarian Universalist congregation I grew up in said women couldn't be ministers, but no one ever said they could, and I had never seen one. But one Sunday, I went to the Unitarian Universalist meeting house in my college town. Not my first time. But this time, a guest minister stepped into the pulpit. The guest preacher was an ordained woman minister. And as I listened to her, I was filled with indignation. How come she gets to do that? When was the last time you felt envious of another? What arouses feelings of jealousy in you? You can let those feelings of envy fester within you. You can turn to resentment, even bitterness. You can be ever on the lookout for one who has or is something you want and long for. Or you can take those feelings of jealousy as a sign that whatever it is you are doing or being needs an adjustment. And if you are blessed with enough grace, privileged enough, and courageous and bold enough, you might just be able to realize what it is you envy. You have a choice. You can let your indignation simmer into resentment, or you can take a step toward realizing what it is you are deeply longing for. When does envy or jealousy strike you? What if you took such feelings not as some fuel for resentment, but as a sign, a call to make a change in your priorities, your choices, your approach to the days given you? When I told my parents I was applying to theological school and interested in becoming a minister, they said, "We took you to church, but we didn't expect you to take it that seriously." Obviously, I did. In seeing a woman in the pulpit for the first time, what was I jealous of? For some, the allure of the pulpit is about being in the limelight. For this introvert, that is not the case. No, what aroused my jealousy was the chance to regularly reflect with others about what was most important in our lives, what we might do, how we might respond to the challenges of the time we live in, how we might raise our children, consider what happens after this life, grieve our losses, respond to and live with suffering, repair the world, and marvel at its beauties and wonders. 16 years ago, you called me by a vote of the members to serve First Parish. A week ago Friday, the members of the search committee took me out to dinner. Now, search committees are intense experiences. Members of the congregation who serve on search committees immerse themselves for 2 years, understanding the congregation, its challenges, its possibilities. So last week at dinner, I asked the members of the search committee that selected me as the candidate what had surprised them about First Parish in these 16 years. After all their work and reflection, what had they not fully expected? And we went round the table. If you were there, you can raise your hand. I know Bonnie's there, we are, Lisa. And the thing that drew the most laughter and the most conversation was this: how First Parish these last 16 years was more spiritual than they expected, took the spiritual life more seriously, welcomed a pastoral prayer in worship, and the silence following. They said they would not have expected Lectio Divina to take off. Yes, it's 3 times a week with over 60 people participating. They did not expect that you would welcome a blessing before the Harvest Moon Fair. They had underestimated your spiritual readiness, your openness, and your longing for the Spirit. I want to linger with you over images, like one slowly turning the pages of a photo album. I walk through this sanctuary and I remember the shared silence, your faces as you walk to place a stone, the arches of love for our youth. I remember how I have laid on a stretcher giving blood in this room, and that's not a metaphor. For those of you that don't know, we have blood drives here. I remembered those I've married here, the young brides and grooms, and yes, the old gay couples. I have a special fondness. I remember how during COVID, this room was converted into an enormous food pantry, complete with refrigerators. I pass by our memorial garden, and I always remember the turkeys that appeared there one Easter morning. I thought they were as if God were issuing a cosmic giggle in the world. I remember the rabbit hole and how we protected the little ones just born, sleeping all curled up into one another, so tiny, so precious. And we walked by it as if it were a shrine. I remember how the ashes of loved ones feel slipping through my fingers as I place them in that memorial garden. I remember Chris Jones' child perched and watching from a branch in the crabapple tree as I buried their father. I remember Dave Turkla's grandchildren, all of us sitting on the ground beside the hole that we had just placed Dave Turkla's ashes in. And they grabbed handfuls of dirt and covered their grandpa's ashes. And for that moment, we were as children at play, in the order of things, returning life to the earth from whence it came. I remember lighting candles for those who died at Sandy Hook, the shooter too, and how one of you came and wondered if that was appropriate. And I said, we are Universalists. Our forebears believed that in the end, we are all embraced by God. I remember when a grand jury in Ferguson, Missouri, decided that there was not enough probable cause to indict police officer Darren Wilson in the shooting death of Michael Brown, an unarmed 18-year-old. We organized a vigil, and 400 people stood on the meeting house lawn, overflowing onto the 4 street corners of Mass Ave and Pleasant Street. I remember when I suggested at a parish committee meeting how we might find some way to have a banner on the meeting house lawn, one that might bear witness to our religious values, say, Black Lives Matter, before it was even a thing. And what I remember was how then Parish Committee Chair Julius Pirelli said, I can do that. And he did it the next day, sinking the first banner posts. What I remember was our responsiveness and our readiness. I remember Webster O'Brien in the midst of chemotherapy, popping his head in my office doorway saying, Marta, it is so easy to slip back. You have to make sure we keep turning outward. I remember too how when he knew he was dying, together we would muse about how to act well his part as husband, father of 2 young teenagers. Among the things he wanted to do was notice God and grace every day that he had left. And so he created a practice. Every day he would text me a photo of a place or a moment in which he had encountered the holy. Webster texted me photos of Walden Pond, the garden at Mass General, a flowering tree in the spring, a rock that he had sat on and prayed. The captions always read G2G. That's the letter G and the number 2. Glory to God. I miss those texts. I remember a passionate conflict in our congregation. Some were very angry about the parish committee and my handling of a personnel matter. And like all personnel matters, we were not at liberty to share the specifics. When Julius Pirelli became board chair, he learned the fuller story. And he would say whenever we were navigating a conflict in the congregation, always assume good intent. Assume good intent of one another. The word decency may sound like an old-fashioned word. In the Bible, the word decency refers to moral uprightness, steadfast goodness, respect, and most of all, integrity. It is something we need in our time. Wisconsin Republican Senator Joseph McCarthy rocketed to attention in 1950 with his allegations that hundreds of communists had infiltrated the State Department and other federal agencies. And he called hundreds of witnesses in public and in closed sessions. In the spring of 1954, McCarthy charged that lax security had occurred at a top-secret Army facility. The Army hired Joseph Welch, a lawyer in Boston, to make its case. At a hearing on June 9, 1954, McCarthy charged that one of Joseph Welch's attorneys working for him had ties to a communist organization. An amazed television audience looked on. Joseph Welch, bald and in a bow tie, responded, "Until this moment, Senator, I think I never really gauged your cruelty or your recklessness." When McCarthy tried to continue his attack, Joseph Welch interrupted him, and with tears in his eyes, he said, "Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You have done enough. Have you no sense of decency?" In that moment, no one knew that this question would signal the slaying of the dragon. Joseph McCarthy would be censured by his party. Such is how change often occurs, a slow growing descent, a moment not recognized by one, even those watching, even the ones speaking, as the turning point in history. Have you no decency? It was as if the country had been waiting for that to be said. Remember this: Joseph Welch was no leader of the masses. He was a man who simply played his part well. Act well your part. There all the honor, all the meaning lies. This is my prayer for you, that you, the members of this beloved congregation, continue to act well your part in the world, in this community, and in your lives. I pray that you continue to provide opportunities for people to both deepen and live out their faith. I pray that you continue to practice a spiritual generosity and maturity grounded in the phrase you adopted: you sing my hymn, I sing yours. And one more thing. I will say it with a story. Settle in. The minister of record in my family growing up was Harold Hadley. He was my parents' first Unitarian Universalist minister, and the minister who officiated at the funeral of my brother, hit by a car and killed at age 10. My older sisters would tell me this story because it is their story more than anyone else's. They were 16 and 13 when our brother was killed. On the day of the funeral, that Unitarian Universalist congregation on Long Island was packed. You can imagine how everyone came out for such a tragic death of a child. The coffin was at the front of the sanctuary. The organist had already begun playing the prelude. The minister was sitting in the chancel near the pulpit. My parents and their then 4 children entered at the back of the sanctuary. And my teenage sisters apparently screamed at the sight of their brother's coffin. Up till then, and quite frankly, ever after, the focus of concern was on my mother and her grief. But in that moment, Harold Hadley, the minister, got up from the chancel, walked down the aisle, and escorted my sisters and me to his office, which was about as far from the sanctuary as my office is here at First Parish. He left behind the congregation and the organist playing. Sorry, Ken. And what my sisters would tell is how he invited them to sit, and he sat down with them and told them they didn't have to go back until they felt ready. And in that moment, their grief, their loss counted. Amidst the many terrible details of my brother's death and its aftermath, that was a redemptive moment that they would turn over. I was too young to remember or to take in what was happening, but in their telling for years after, I would wonder how it was that Harold Hadley knew what was important in that moment. How was it that he was able to set aside all the material demands of the moment, a waiting congregation, a playing organist, people in the kitchen making ready for the collation? How was it that he knew what was truly important and seized whatever agency he had to attend to it. When have you known what was important with such clarity? When have you set aside plans and the expectations of others to attend to a worthy thing? When we come together as a religious community, we aim to know what is important and use whatever agency we have to attend to that pain, that joy, that possibility. That is the promise of our gathering and our entire religious enterprise. I expect great things from you. In my retirement, you are welcome to write me to the mailbox Charlie and I are installing on a rural road in Vermont and tell me of your doings. I want to hear of the new happenings at First Parish. I close with a poem. I have read this poem on the last Sunday of every church I served. Ticket by Charles Hartman. I love that moment at the ticket window, he says, when you are to say the name of your destination and realize that you could say anything. The man at the counter will believe you. The woman at the counter would never say, no, that isn't where you're going. You could buy a ticket for one place and go to another, less far along the line. Suddenly, you would find yourself, he says, in a locality you've never seen before, where no one has ever seen you, and you could say your name was anything you like. And nobody will say, no, that isn't you. This is who you are. It thrills me every time. I love that moment at the ticket window when you could say the name of your destination and realize you could say anything. There is grief, yes, and there is a thrill. Hold both as true.